Last night, as I'm recording this video, we saw another great Game 7 between the Atlanta Hawks and the Philadelphia 76ers. And just like the one in the other Eastern Conference semifinal between the Bucks and the Nets, it went to 7 games, and ultimately we're seeing pretty much an upset here. The Bucks upset the Nets, and now the Hawks are defeating the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference in the Philadelphia 76ers. Lots of things had to go wrong for the Sixers, and lots of things had to go right for the Hawks in order for this to happen. But ultimately, in the last game, Trey played pretty bad, and the Hawks were still able to win. And overall, I think we can pretty much agree that despite the series being really close, the Atlanta Hawks absolutely play like the better team in this series. They had a ton of comebacks, and the Sixers had lots of collapses, and especially down the stretch in games, the Hawks were absolutely the better team in this series. So I'm going to be giving my overall analysis of the series today, why the Hawks were able to win, and my prediction for the Eastern Conference semifinal. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any new videos. I've mentioned this a ton in my recent videos, but I'm posting a lot right now during the playoffs, so make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new. And with that being said, let's get into it. The first thing I've got to talk about here that's on everyone's minds after this series is simply the play of Ben Simmons. This is probably the worst performance in a playoff series that we've ever seen from a player that made the All-Star team. And on my Instagram for my YouTube account, make sure to actually follow me on there as well at danieldelari.yt on Instagram. But a few days ago after Game 5, I posted a reminder that Trey Young did not make the All-Star team this year and Ben Simmons did. And look at the huge difference of just how both of these players have performed in this playoff run. Obviously, Simmons is still the much better defender, but it's just not even a comparison who's better between these two players anymore. Trey Young is by leagues better, the better offensive player, and he played so much better in this playoff series. It's not even a comparison anymore. But we look at what Ben Simmons did in this series. He just made himself not only a liability, obviously, at the free throw line, but just a complete offensive liability. The Sixers are actually a better offensive team when Ben Simmons is off the court, because when he's on the court, he obviously doesn't bring any shooting or spacing to the team. So for example, when Joel Embiid is in the post and Ben Simmons is one of the off-ball players, it makes it a lot easier for defenses to crowd the paint and shrink the floor, because Ben Simmons just has no spacing, and when he's on the court, the paint is just more clogged for the team overall, and when he's off the court, their offense just flows a little bit better. He's obviously still a pretty good playmaker and a very good passer. He did average 9 assists per game in this series, and that's pretty much the only good thing that he brought offensively, but he only averaged 10 points per game in this series. He only shot 20 or 45 field goal attempts in this entire series. You could tell he was not confident at all. There was one time in Game 7 where he drove to the rim, beat his defender off the dribble, had a wide open dunk, and then passed it up to Matisse Thybulle, who ended up getting fouled and then going to the line and hitting 1 of 2. So just little things like that. Like, he had no confidence. He didn't go to the rim at all. And obviously the free throw struggles, like especially in Game 5, they were playing the hack-a-Ben strategy. The Hawks were just hacking him, fouling him on purpose, with it not in the last 2 minutes. Like, off the ball, they would just foul him. And in total in this series, he shot 15 of 45 from the free throw line, 33% from the line, which is the worst free throw percentage in the history of playoff series for those that have the qualified amount of free throw attempts. So just offensively, a horrible series from Ben Simmons. His overall efficiency wasn't bad because he didn't take that many field goal attempts and shot 60% from the field, but his true shooting is 53%, which is about a -3 relative true shooting, and obviously it was brought down a lot because of those free throws. Just a complete liability at the free throw line, and I hate that I'm hating on him this much because I never do this type of stuff on the channel. I don't want to hate on players like this, but this is just the worst playoff series that we've ever seen from an all-star, and Ben Simmons has to be held accountable. In the offseason this year, he has to develop some sort of a jump shot and at least just get his free throw percentage up to 60%, so when he gets fouled, he's not a complete liability. He just has a lot of not only physical things to work on, but mental things to work on in the offseason. Things like just getting his confidence up and just making sure that he's not going to be an offensive liability for this team going forward, because if he is, they're going to be in big trouble. The next thing I want to talk about here is the Atlanta Hawks defense and how they've been able to succeed not only in this series, but over the course of the entire playoffs and really the entire season too. I didn't think they would be that good of a defensive team, and in the regular season they were a below average defensive teams in terms of defensive rating, but in the playoffs they ranked 4th in defensive rating with around 108, so that's pretty much how many points you give up per 100 possessions. And against the Sixers they gave up about 110 points per game, which isn't great, but against a really potent offensive team like the Sixers, it's really impressive that they were able to hold them to that. And I've been studying this team's defense a lot because it's really interesting to see how they succeed as an overall unit as a defense. And I've been considering maybe starting next season doing some of like these breakdown type of videos where I'll look at some NBA clips. It would require a lot of effort for me to actually go and get the NBA clips, screen record them, do some more editing and whatnot, but stay tuned for that because maybe next year, starting in the regular season next year, I might be doing some more breakdown type of videos. And if I do end up doing this, I really want to do it on the Atlanta Hawks defense because it's so interesting how they succeed as an overall unit. Nate McMillan has done an amazing job with his team. The thing that stands out the most to me is how they hide their bad defenders, specifically Trey Young and also Kevin Huerter sometimes. We know that Trey Young is still one of, if not the very worst defender in the entire NBA, and they do a great job of hiding him. First of all, they'll always stick him in the corner just to start off possessions, and when the Sixers try to get him in action, they do a great job of either switching on screens, or sometimes if they pass it down and see a mismatch, they'll switch on the pass. And overall, they do a great job of hiding Trey Young and Huerter, and they do a fantastic job of maximizing Clint Capella. This dude has defended so many shots in this series. He's easily their best defender, and they really try to run their defense through him and force offenses to run their offense through the guy that's going to be against Clint Capella. Like, overall, they do a great job of forcing him towards him, and I'll be talking about a little bit Capella as well, and just how good he was defensively in this series and how he did a great job against Joel Embiid. But they really maximize him. They have some great individual defenders too, guys like John Collins and also DeAndre Hunter. They struggled this series a little bit more defensively because they didn't have DeAndre Hunter, but overall they do a great job as a team communicating, rotating. They did very well as well on rotations in this series. A very good perimeter defending team. They do a great job of hiding their bad defenders, maximizing their good defenders, and overall their defense really paid off in this series. And in the next series against the Milwaukee Bucks, it's going to be a struggle for them to score against this team. Like, I see how the Atlanta Hawks could have a pretty good plan to shut down Giannis, and overall when they're running their offense, it's going to be tough to score against this Atlanta Hawks team if they bring out and play with the same plan that they've had this entire playoffs. They have a great defense that I've really been impressed by this year. Now, next thing I want to talk about here is Joel Embiid and his matchup against Clint Capella. Going into this series, I thought this was going to be a really entertaining matchup, and that's exactly what it was. And ultimately, on the defensive side of the floor, I think Clint ultimately won this matchup. Joel Embiid still put up 30 points per game and 13 rebounds per game in this series, which is absolutely dominant, but he took a lot of shots. I think he had way too many, actually, opportunities. I think the Sixers needed to sometimes go away from this strategy of having Embiid against Capella in the post. I think if they played one-on-one the entire series, I don't think it would be that effective. I think they really should have tried to run their offense a little bit more as a team instead of going to Joel so much in the post, but ultimately he still did average 30 points, but only on 47% shooting, which absolutely is not very good for a center with Embiid's playstyle. And Joel had more turnovers than assists in this series. He had 33 turnovers compared to 27 assists, and this is obviously not a good assist to turnover ratio at all. And overall, Capella just did an amazing job guarding him. This guy proved this series that he absolutely deserved that second all-defensive second team spot over Joel Embiid. He deserved to be on the all-defensive team this year. He absolutely got snubbed, and overall he did an amazing job against Embiid and everyone else that was driving towards him at the rim, but mostly against Joel, especially. Like, he guarded him so well in the post. And overall, the fact that Capella guarded Embiid this entire series and held him to under 47% from the field as a center is absolutely insane. Capella deserves a ton of credit for this Hawks win and their overall success for this entire season, and because of just how good he is defensively, I go as far to say that he has a case to be a top 5 center in this league. Currently, I have him ranked either 6th or 7th, but defense is just so important for centers. Capela's an all-defensive caliber player without a doubt, and he just deserves so much credit for the success of this Hawks team, and he's one of the main reasons why they're here right now. His defense has been amazing, especially against Embiid, and he was the main reason why Embiid was not dominating as much as he usually does in this series. The last thing I want to talk about here is the play of Trey Young, but specifically his playmaking ability in this series. He wasn't exactly the same scoring the ball as he was in the series against the Knicks. He still averaged a crazy 29 points per game, but shot only 39% from the field and -2 relative true shooting for this series. And I mean, you can't really blame him. I mean, he was guarded by elite defenders like Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, and guys like Tyrese Maxey even made it really tough on him on the perimeter, so his scoring wasn't exactly the same, and obviously had a very inefficient game 7, but he was very clutch. He showed up down the stretch, hit some big shots, and like I mentioned, specifically with his playmaking, had an incredible series. He averaged a total of 11 assists per game in the series, only 3.5 turnovers per game, which means his assist to turnover ratio was 3-1, which is absolutely elite. He had an assist percentage of 48% in this series, meaning that he assisted on 48% of the buckets that he did not score, which is obviously absolutely insane. An offensive box plus minus of +8, which is very good, and a box creation of 18, which is the best in the playoffs in the second round, and this stat means that he pretty much creates 18 open shots per game, and that's what he did in the second round of the playoffs. Overall, just amazing playmaking for Trey, and like I mentioned, despite putting up almost 30 points per game in this series, you could tell that his scoring just wasn't as good as it was in the series against the New York Knicks. He was pretty well defended on the perimeter when it comes to scoring, but his playmaking and passing ability was absolutely insane. He has incredible gravity out there on the floor, always draws 2 defenders, and he keeps you honest because when he's operating in the pick and roll, he can hit that floater time and time again, so you really have to pay a ton of attention to him when he's driving in the pick and roll. One of the best, if not the best in the league at throwing that lob, does a great job of passing it up to his bigs, rolling towards the rim, and overall, Trey Young has given himself a case to be the best playmaker in the playoffs so far. It's been an insane run for him so far, especially in this round with his playmaking ability, and we've got to give credit to Trey Young for what he's done. I still find him slightly overrated just because he really doesn't bring anything defensively. His team has to work to hide him, but he still has proven me in this series that he's easily a top 25 player, definitely has a case in my opinion to be a top 20 player, and he's just been so good in this overall playoffs, this series. His playmaking was absolutely insane in this series, and it was a huge factor for success for this Hawks team offensively. So there you have it, that is the end of today's video. Those are the 4 main reasons why I think the Hawks were able to beat the Sixers in this series. In terms of my prediction for the next round, the Eastern Conference Final with the Bucks and the Hawks, this is going to be a really entertaining series. I think both defenses match up pretty well overall against the other team's offense. Giannis versus Clint Capella will be a really interesting matchup, especially in transition. Same thing with Trey Young and Drew Holiday. It's really close. I'm not going to go in depth on what I think is going to happen, but I'm going to take the Bucks in 7 in this series. Let me know down in the comments your prediction for that series as well, and why you think the Hawks were able to beat the Philadelphia 76ers in the second round. Thank you all for watching this video. If you're new, as I mentioned, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you guys next video.